There is a power within you that defies logic, a voice that speaks without sound, a presence that knows without reason, a force that guides when everything else fails. I call it the sixth sense, the door to what I call the temple of wisdom. It is not sight, not hearing, not touch, taste, or smell. It is something deeper, something finer, something beyond the physical. The sixth sense is not a step you can force. It is not a skill you learn overnight. It is not something you control. It is something you receive. It comes after desire, after faith, after planning, persistence, and decision, after mastering the conscious mind and planting your intentions deep in the subconscious. It arrives when you've proven that you are ready, not ready with intellect, ready with spirit. This is why I placed it at the end of the book, because until you've built the foundation, until your mind is conditioned to focus, believe, and direct thought, you cannot fully understand the sixth sense, much less use it. But once the foundation is laid, this sense begins to awaken. You may feel it first as a hunch, a flash, a deep inner pull that says, do this, call now, stop, go. You won't know how you know, but you'll know. And when you follow it, something powerful happens. The right people show up. The right idea arrives. The danger is avoided. The opportunity appears. It may seem like coincidence to others, but to you, it is confirmation. Confirmation that something higher is working with you, through you, for you. I have experienced this too many times to call it luck. The sixth sense has whispered to me in the darkest moments, offered ideas when I was stuck, warned me when my logic said yes, but my gut said no. It has never spoken with fear-only clarity, never in panic-only peace. And I came to trust it more than anything else. Now let me be very clear. You cannot summon the sixth sense by command. You cannot demand that it speak, but you can prepare yourself to hear it when it does. You do that by aligning your thoughts, by mastering the earlier principles, by calming the noise in your mind, by living in tune with your highest purpose. And when you do, you create an inner silence so rich that wisdom begins to speak. You might call it intuition. You might call it the voice of God. You might call it inner knowing. To me, it doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that you listen and that you understand. This is not fantasy. This is the final faculty of the trained mind. The sixth sense is the soul's radar. It picks up what your logic cannot. It sees what your eyes miss. It responds before your intellect can calculate. It is the highest form of guidance because it is beyond your own knowledge. And once you begin to use it, you will never again feel alone in your decisions. You will know, I am not guessing. I am being guided. That is a kind of confidence no textbook, no strategy, no title can give. And it becomes available to you the moment you begin to live with awareness, discipline, and faith in what lies just beyond the visible. Because what's waiting on the other side of logic is often the greatest wisdom you'll ever receive. Now you may be asking, how do I recognize the sixth sense when it shows up? What does it feel like? How is it different from imagination or fear or wishful thinking? Let me tell you, you'll know it not because it is loud, but because it is clear. The sixth sense is never frantic. It doesn't beg. It doesn't argue. It speaks once and it speaks with calm authority. It feels like a whisper that rings louder than a scream, like a knowing that arrives before thought, like a signal that bypasses logic, but lands in your bones as truth. This is the kind of awareness that doesn't need proof. It carries its own conviction. But here's the challenge. Most people never hear it, not because they lack the capacity, but because their minds are too loud. They live in mental chaos. They react all day. They fill every gap with noise and news, opinions, fear, comparison. And the sixth sense doesn't yell over the noise. It waits for quiet. That's the first condition for hearing it. Silence. Not the silence of sound, but the silence of distraction. The inner stillness that allows perception to rise. If you want to awaken this part of yourself, You must create space for it. Time to be alone with your thoughts. Time to think deeply, feel clearly, breathe slowly. Time without interruption. And more importantly, you must build the character to trust what you hear. Because the sixth sense often says things that don't match what the world expects. It may lead you away from what looks comfortable. It may point you towards something uncertain. It may ask you to step forward before you see the staircase. That's why most people ignore it. They hear it but dismiss it. They feel it but overthink it. They sense it but talk themselves out of it. And in doing so, they miss their moment. They miss the solution. They miss the warning. They miss the window of grace that was open just for them. So, how do you learn to trust this sense? You begin by noticing. Start tracking the moments when you felt a deep inner nudge, and later realized it was right. Recall the times when you ignored your instinct and paid the price. The more aware you become of this pattern, the more you'll start to distinguish real intuition from fear, impulse, or ego. And once you do, you'll learn to pause, to listen, to wait not in laziness, but in awareness. Because you'll know, if I stay still long enough, if I stay open wide enough, the right message will come. And when it comes, I will move. That is how the sixth sense operates. It is not the voice of desperation. It is the voice of wisdom. And wisdom doesn't chase you. It waits for your readiness. You don't have to force it. You don't have to fight for it. You only have to become still enough to receive it. And when you do, life begins to change. Your timing sharpens. Your risks become bolder yet wiser. Your decisions align with something deeper than logic. You stop asking for constant reassurance because your guidance is internal, not external. You begin to walk with a quiet confidence because you know there is a deeper part of me that sees what I can't, and I trust it. I want you to see something clearly now. The sixth sense is not a trick. It is not a shortcut. It is the final reward of a disciplined mind. You don't wake up one day and suddenly have it. It reveals itself to those who have done the work, the internal work. That's why I placed this chapter last. Not because it's the least important, but because it is the crown. It sits on top of the entire structure of thought. It cannot stand without the foundation beneath it. That foundation is made up of a burning desire, absolute faith, clear, organized planning, decisive action, persistent effort, mastery over fears, doubts, and distractions. If you haven't built those things, the sixth sense will remain quiet. It doesn't waste its wisdom on noise. But once you've practiced the principles, once you've reshaped your thinking and trained your emotions, once you've conditioned your subconscious to align with your goals, then something opens. It's like a door creaking open inside your mind. And through that door, guidance flows. You begin to get answers to questions you haven't asked out loud. You sense solutions before you understand the problem. You act not just with logic, but with a strange sense of inner timing. People will call you lucky. They'll say you have great instincts. But the truth is, you've connected to a higher form of intelligence, one that sees beyond time, beyond risk, beyond analysis. And that connection didn't happen by accident. It happened by preparation. Now listen carefully. The sixth sense will rarely give you long explanations. It will not always speak in words. It often comes in flashes, feelings, or a sudden clarity. It's the kind of knowing that makes you say, I don't know how I know this, but I do. And that moment, if you learn to trust it, can save you years of doubt and wrong turns. Let me give you an example. In my own life, there were moments when all logic said, wait, hold back, be cautious. But something deeper said, move now. And when I followed that inner voice, I made decisions that led to opportunity, protection, and growth long before the reasoning mind caught up. That is the beauty of the sixth sense. It moves faster than thought. It moves from a different dimension, one where truth is known, not argued. But here's the caution. You must build the maturity to use this sense responsibly. It is not a toy. It is not a replacement for reason. It is a partner to reason. It adds to logic, but never opposes truth. It's your edge, but only if you've earned it. That's why I say, the sixth sense does not appear in a cluttered mind. It shows up when the other faculties are in harmony. So ask yourself, have I built the inner order? Have I trained my thoughts, shaped my emotions, quieted my doubts? Because only then does this sense become available. Not once, not occasionally, but reliably. And when it does, life changes. Not because the world outside is different, but because the guide inside is now awake. You begin to live differently, decide differently, walk differently, and people will feel it. They'll feel the presence of someone who is not just thinking from the head, but from a deeper source. That's the kind of person the world listens to, and that's who you are becoming. Let's now look at the sixth sense, not just as a tool for creation, but as a shield for protection. Because sometimes the greatest victory is not what you gain, but what you avoid. I cannot count how many times I was spared costly mistakes because I listened to a quiet inner signal. No thunder, no warnings, just a subtle tension, a sense of something's not right, an unspoken pause. And that pause saved me. This is one of the greatest gifts of the sixth sense. It alerts you often before danger is visible. It tugs at you. It slows your hand. It redirects your path. Some call it a gut feeling. Some call it discernment. I call it advanced warning. And the more you live in tune with this part of yourself, the more you learn to honor those quiet alarms. Because when you ignore them, you usually pay the price. Let me be clear. The sixth sense doesn't always give a reason. It won't show you a full report. It will simply nudge you, not this, not now. Turn around. And if you're wise, you'll listen. Because while logic analyzes the visible, intuition picks up on the invisible. It senses what the eye can't see. It picks up emotional tone, unspoken motives, energetic shifts, and it doesn't argue. It just informs. That's why it takes maturity to follow it, because it might tell you to walk away from something that looks perfect on paper. It might tell you to trust someone your mind isn't sure about yet. Your soul says yes. It's not about rebellion. It's about alignment. You begin to realize life is not just about making good decisions. It's about making the right ones. And the right ones are often found not in the numbers, but in the feeling beneath the surface. Now, the sixth sense doesn't just warn, it also opens doors. It will lead you toward the call you didn't know you were ready to answer. It will nudge you to reach out to someone, and that message becomes the missing piece. It will spark an idea, one that leads to a result 10 times bigger than anything you'd planned. And it will do all this quietly. That's the paradox. The most powerful guidance often comes in the form of subtle knowing. You have to respect it enough to act even when no one else understands. I remember one moment like this, a quiet whisper in the middle of a storm of doubt. Everything outside was shouting, "Stop, wait, be careful." But the inner voice said, "Go now." And that moment changed everything. It wasn't loud. It wasn't urgent. But it was true. And when I followed it, I stepped into alignment I could have never planned. That's what the sixth sense does. It aligns you with the right moment, the right person, the right opportunity, often before your mind can catch up. And once you've experienced this enough times, you no longer need endless evidence. You simply trust. You trust that the same intelligence that breathes through nature, that spins galaxies, that orchestrates seasons and sunrise, also speaks to you quietly, clearly, consistently if you're willing to listen. So I ask you now, are you still enough to hear it? Are you brave enough to follow it? Because sometimes the thing that saves you won't be logic, but a whisper, and that whisper might just be your greatest turning point. Now let's explore the sixth sense as a tool not just for protection, but for creation. Because some of the most extraordinary breakthroughs don't come from deep analysis, they come from sudden insight. That spark of genius, that solution no one else saw. That perfect phrase, that product idea, that strategic move, arriving not through effort, but through reception. The sixth sense is the gateway to what many call the creative mind. It is the place ideas are born, where innovation lives, where leaders tap into the unseen and pull forward what others won't discover for years. And once you understand this, you stop trying to figure everything out with your conscious mind. You start creating space for inspiration to come through. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What is trying to come through me right now?" That question opens doors. And you begin to notice the best ideas often arrive when you're not trying. When you're walking, shaving, resting, driving in silence. Because the conscious mind has finally relaxed, and now the deeper mind can speak. Here's the mistake most people make. They try to create from pressure, from noise, from urgency. But the sixth sense doesn't respond to force. It responds to flow. And flow comes from alignment. That's why some of the greatest leaders and creators are also the most intuitive. They make decisions others can't explain. They see opportunities no one else sees. They pivot when the market says stay. They trust what they sense before there's data to prove it. And time proves them right. Not because they're lucky, but because they're listening on a different channel. You can develop this same channel. Start by honoring moments of insight. Write them down. Reflect on them. Build trust with your inner signals. Then give space for those moments to show up more often. Make silence a part of your routine, not as escape, but as strategy. Because in that silence, you'll find signals, ideas, truths. And the more you act on those signals, the more you strengthen the connection. It becomes a relationship. The sixth sense becomes not a rare miracle, but a familiar friend. You'll begin to sense when something's right before anyone else sees it. You'll start knowing who to call without a reason. You'll shift direction, not because of doubt, but because you feel the wave changing. This is leadership at the highest level. It's the kind that doesn't just respond to trends, it creates them. Because when you live from the sixth sense, you're not just reacting, you're receiving. And what you receive is often far greater than what you could have built on your own. So I challenge you, don't just train your logic, train your listening. Don't just plan from your head. Open your intuition, because the greatest moves you ever make may not come from thinking harder, but from thinking higher. Let me now take you deeper into what the sixth sense truly is. It's not just instinct, not just emotional intelligence, not even just creative insight. The sixth sense is your direct link to infinite intelligence. That's a bold claim, I know, but I've lived it, and so have many others, whether they knew it or not. There is a source of wisdom that goes far beyond your conscious thinking, a level of intelligence that cannot be explained by logic, but that produces results, answers, direction every time. And your sixth sense is the bridge. It is the channel through which infinite intelligence communicates. Not with words, but with certainty. Not with noise, but with clarity. Now, here's the truth you must grasp. You cannot access this level of mind from a place of chaos. You cannot receive higher wisdom with a distracted mind, an anxious body, or an undisciplined spirit. The sixth sense becomes available only after the rest of your mental house is in order. That's why I saved this principle for last. Because before you can trust that whisper, you must first control the shouting of your lower mind. Control your fears. Master your emotions. Clean up your thoughts. Align your desires. Only then does the higher signal come through. This is not punishment. It's principle. You wouldn't expect to hear a quiet song while standing in the middle of a construction site. You wouldn't expect to catch a faint radio signal while flipping the dial every second. Clarity comes from stillness. The sixth sense becomes active when the lower self steps aside. When you are no longer ruled by fear, when you are no longer dominated by ego, when you are no longer chasing validation, that's when it begins. And when it does, you realize you've never been alone. Infinite intelligence has always been available. It was never hiding. It was never absent. It was simply waiting for a clean channel to speak through. That's the sixth sense. It is the antenna of the soul, the language of wisdom, the whisper of the source. It's how ideas arrive that you didn't know you needed, how you suddenly know what to say to someone in pain, how you find courage when your mind is still afraid, how you receive an insight that shifts your entire direction in a single moment. And Gnosis is not reserved for mystics or philosophers. It's available to you, but only if you're willing to tune yourself for it. This means living in integrity. It means treating your mind like a sacred space. It means asking for guidance and being humble enough to listen when it comes. It may not come in the way you expect. It rarely shows up on your timeline, but it always comes. And when it does, you will recognize it not because it's familiar, but because it's true. You'll feel its calm, its clarity, its power. You'll know it didn't come from you, but it came for you. And when you follow it, you begin to experience something few ever do. A life not driven just by ambition, but by alignment. Not just by goals, but by guidance. That's when you start building from a deeper blueprint. One you didn't invent, but were entrusted with. And the more you walk with it, the more it walks with you. Now that you understand what the sixth sense is, let me show you how to make it practical, because it's not enough to just believe in it. You must learn to use it. Daily, intentionally, wisely. The sixth sense is not a miracle. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, it strengthens with use. Most people experience flashes of intuition, but they dismiss them. They overthink. They talk themselves out of what they already know. But when you start paying attention, you'll see that your inner guidance has been speaking to you all along. You just didn't recognize the voice. So the first step is awareness. Start by tracking your inner nudges. When something says, call that person, do it. When you feel, take that exit, take it. When you sense, say no, trust it. You don't need to explain why. You only need to observe what happens when you follow. Over time, you'll build a library of evidence, moments where your intuition was right, moments when logic said one thing, but truth came from someplace deeper. And as you begin to trust this guidance, the voice becomes louder, clearer, more consistent, because now it knows you're listening. The next step is stillness. You must give the sixth sense room to speak. It won't fight for your attention. It won't compete with your to-do list. It won't shout over the news or drown in noise. It waits patiently until you make space. So create that space. A few quiet minutes each morning. A walk without headphones. A journal where you reflect, not just react. Ask yourself simple questions. What do I need to know today? What direction feels aligned? What am I not seeing? Then pause and listen. At first, nothing might happen. That's okay. You're not trying to force an answer. You're training your mind to stay open long enough to receive one. The third step is humility. You must admit that the best answers don't always come from you. They come through you. This requires letting go of ego, of needing to control everything, of thinking your way to every solution. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stop thinking and tune in. And finally, take aligned action. The sixth sense is not just about insight, it's about instruction. When you receive guidance, don't delay. Move with trust, even if it doesn't make perfect sense. Because every time you follow that voice, you reinforce the signal. You make it easier to hear next time. You build a relationship with something wiser than logic, and that's when your life begins to shift. You'll start making faster decisions without second guessing. You'll recognize patterns sooner. You'll avoid mistakes others walk into. You'll move with a calm confidence that others won't be able to explain, but they'll feel it. That's what happens when you live with intuition, not just intellect. You don't abandon reason. You expand it. You combine your experience with insight, your logic with awareness, your ambition with alignment. And that's how you rise, not just with effort, but with guidance. So from now on, Don't ignore that inner nudge. Don't wait for permission to trust your gut. Don't silence your insight because it doesn't fit the spreadsheet. You have access to something deeper, something wiser, something built into you. Since the moment you were born, honor it and let it lead you. You may be wondering, is this just theory? Is the sixth sense real or just a poetic idea? Let me assure you, the most successful minds in history used it. Some called it instinct. Others called it a flash of genius. Many never gave it a name, but they all trusted it. They may not have known they were tapping into the sixth sense, but they were using it constantly. Let me give you examples. Thomas Edison, the man behind more than 1,000 inventions, often described how ideas came to him. He would sit in silence, hold metal balls in his hand, and wait for the moment just before sleep. That's when the ideas would drop in fully formed, not from textbooks, not from brainstorming, but from the quiet. Henry Ford trusted his inner sense of timing so much that he would delay major business decisions until he felt right about them. No one could rush him. He knew that great moves weren't made from panic, but from inner clarity. Abraham Lincoln, during the darkest hours of the Civil War, often spoke of being led by a force beyond himself. He didn't see his choices as purely political. He saw them as part of something higher, a deeper sense of duty he could not always explain. Einstein, one of the greatest minds of science, famously said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." He knew that pure logic alone was not enough. The best discoveries came from imagination, from flashes of insight that reason could not summon. All these greats, whether they knew it or not, were using the sixth sense. They weren't just thinking harder, they were thinking higher. And so can you. This is not reserved for the gifted or the mystical. It is available to anyone willing to trust the part of themselves that doesn't shout, but whispers. The sixth sense is democratic. It speaks to the prepared, not the perfect. And it's ready to work through you. When you stop dismissing those inner signals as nothing, think of this. Every great decision in your life, every turning point, every relationship that mattered, every time you listened to your gut and it turned out right, was the sixth sense in action. It's been guiding you all along. You just didn't have the words for it. Now that you do, use it. Use it to build, to create, to protect, to lead. Because when you begin to rely on this sense, you'll notice a shift. You no longer make decisions based only on what you see. You begin to move based on what you know without always knowing how. That's not recklessness. That's a deeper kind of wisdom. It's the kind of wisdom that the greatest minds lived by. And now it's your turn. But remember this. They didn't just have the sixth sense. They honored it. They made space for it. They listened to it in silence and followed it with courage. That's your work now. To slow down enough to hear. To trust enough to follow. To act even when others don't understand why. Because the ones who build extraordinary lives are not just the most talented, they are the most tuned in. There's one more dimension to the sixth sense that few talk about, but it may be the most important of all. The sixth sense is not just for you. It is meant to be shared. This inner faculty, this whisper from infinite intelligence, this guidance that leads you to clarity, protection, opportunity, is also what allows you to become a source of light for others. Because when you live in tune with your higher mind, you don't just help yourself. You become someone others trust, lean on, and listen to. You become a leader, not because of your title, but because of your presence. When your decisions come from intuition, they carry a weight that logic alone cannot match. People feel it. They may not know why, but they listen more closely when you speak. They feel safer in your company. They gain confidence from your calm. And that's because you've stopped operating from fear and started operating from inner truth. Let me say this. People are not looking for more noise. They are looking for certainty. not loudness, clarity, not control, alignment. And when you live from the sixth sense, you naturally offer those things. You become the kind of person who speaks less but says more, who doesn't need to prove anything because truth proves itself. This is how you lead teams. This is how you build trust in relationships. This is how you raise strong children. This is how you teach, guide, heal, inspire. Not from ego, but from connection. And it doesn't mean you'll always have the perfect answer. It means you'll sense when to pause, when to speak, when to hold space for someone without trying to fix them. That's wisdom. That's maturity. That's the sixth sense in action. It makes you useful to the world, not just successful. And isn't that what we all want at our core? To know that we didn't just accumulate knowledge, we became a source. To know that when someone came to us in doubt or fear or need, we could offer more than advice. We could offer presence, perspective, peace. That's what the sixth sense gives you. It doesn't make you better than others. It makes you available to them in a way that most minds are too distracted to be. It makes you a vessel, not of perfection, but of deep usefulness. And here's the most beautiful part. The more you serve from this place, the more insight you receive. The more you trust the sixth sense, not just to guide your own life, but to bless others through you, the stronger that signal becomes. It's a cycle. You receive wisdom. You share it. You serve. You grow. And in that process, you become someone who's no longer chasing success, but embodying purpose. That's where fulfillment lives. So I ask you today, what if the ideas you're receiving aren't just for your benefit? What if the guidance you felt isn't just to help you prosper, but to help you guide others? What if that sudden clarity, that quiet instinct, that strong feeling to speak up or reach out wasn't just your voice, but the voice of wisdom working through you? Because once you realize that, you stop hesitating. You understand, this is bigger than me. This is service. This is leadership. And that's when life takes on a whole new depth. You don't just listen to the sixth sense for direction. You live by it for contribution. So now we arrive at the end of this journey. But truthfully, this is the beginning of another one. Because once the sixth sense becomes active in your life, you don't just live differently. You become someone entirely new. You stop striving only with effort and start moving with intuition. You stop doubting every decision and begin trusting the voice within. You stop asking, "Can I do this?" and begin listening for, "Is this mine to do?" This is not arrogance. This is alignment. You've tuned your mind. You've cleared your fears. You've trained your emotions. You've mastered the lower self. And now, you are ready for something higher. The sixth sense is not the loudest voice in the room, but it's always the truest. It doesn't speak in theories. It speaks in conviction. It doesn't argue for approval. It whispers what must be done, whether the world understands or not. And when you live by it, you unlock a level of peace, clarity, and purpose that no external success can provide. Because now you are being guided, not randomly, but precisely. Not emotionally, but faithfully. Not from impulse, but from alignment. And life begins to mirror that. You make fewer mistakes. You attract the right people. You're at the right place at the right time. Not because of luck, but because your timing is tuned to something higher. Your confidence no longer depends on applause. It comes from knowing, I'm walking the right path, even if no one else can see it yet. And you stop being shaken by uncertainty because you've become familiar with the unknown. You've made peace with mystery. You've learned to trust the invisible. And that is the mark of someone who has grown rich, not just in money, but in wisdom, in presence, in power. So let me leave you with this. The sixth sense is not magic. It is mastery. It's the mind, elevated. It's emotion, disciplined. It's spirit, awake. It's the reward for those who have done the work within and are now ready to receive the gift beyond. That gift is guidance. It's insight. It's protection, inspiration, direction, not occasionally, but daily. It becomes part of you, like breath, like heartbeat, like knowing. And from this place, you no longer chase the future. You create it. You no longer beg for answers. You listen for them. And you no longer wonder if you're worthy. You move like someone who already knows they are. That is the power of the sixth sense, and it is yours. Use it, honor it, live by it. Because when you do, you don't just think and grow rich. You feel, trust, and grow wise. And wisdom is the rarest wealth of all.